The scream tore through the dusk like a wounded hawk, then vanished into the emptiness. The desert swallowed it whole. No one answered. She lay in the dust, breath hitching, the heat still rising from the cracked earth beneath her. Her wrists burned where the ropes had bitten, her body shook with exhaustion and disbelief. They had left her. The people she'd trusted, the ones she'd once called her own, had ridden off without a backward glance. The hoofbeats had faded hours ago, and the beasts were already circling, thin shapes moving along the ridges, patient and waiting. She tried to stand, failed, and tried again. Her knees buckled, but she pushed forward, dragging herself toward the line where the land kissed the dying light. The sky was bruised, stained with the color of rusted metal. Her throat felt carved from stone. Every breath scraped. Still, she moved, slow as prayer, stubborn as a heartbeat that refuses to quit. She had no name left here, no tribe to call her back, but the will to live, that remained, wild and burning. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a horse exhaled. The sound drifted through the wind, low and steady, like a promise. She froze. Her heart stumbled in her chest. Not another beast, she prayed. Not men returning to finish what they'd started. She crouched low, breath shallow, and waited. The horse appeared first, tall, chestnut, dust caked on its mane. Then the rider, a man in a brown coat and weather-beaten hat, his silhouette etched against the last amber light. His face was quiet, unreadable. He scanned the horizon before noticing her, small and broken against the sand. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he dismounted, boots sinking into the earth with a heavy sound that somehow felt gentle. She wanted to crawl away, but her body refused. When he reached her, she flinched. His voice came low, nearly a whisper. Easy now. No judgment, no pity, only calm. He knelt, brushed dust from her forehead, and saw the bruises, the dry blood on her lip, the hollow of hunger in her cheeks. She met his gaze once. Blue-gray eyes beneath the brim, eyes that had seen too much loss to fear any more of it. He didn't ask what happened. The desert had already told him enough. Without a word, he lifted her, careful as if she were glass, and carried her toward his horse. She weighed almost nothing. Her head fell against his shoulder, her breath ragged, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. He felt it, that fragile rhythm, and something inside him, long dormant, stirred. They rode in silence, the world dimming around them. The air cooled, and stars began to scatter above. She drifted in and out of wakefulness, catching fragments. The smell of leather, the creak of saddle straps, his steady heartbeat close to her ear. For the first time in days, the wind no longer sounded like a threat. At a bend near the canyon, a faint light flickered, his cabin. Modest, lonely, built from rough pine and long winters. He carried her inside, laid her near the hearth, and lit the fire. The flame shivered, then grew, painting the room with trembling warmth. He cleaned her wounds using water from a tin basin, every motion unhurried. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. He shook his head gently. Rest first. Words can wait. 4 hours, the only sounds were fire and breath. She drifted between dreams, faces of her past fading into the orange glow, whispers of blame dissolving into smoke. When she finally stirred, she found him sitting nearby, hat in hand, eyes distant but not cold. She watched him through half-lidded eyes. His hands were strong but careful, the kind that build and mend rather than destroy. The firelight drew faint lines across his face, scars maybe, or just years of sun and silence. She wondered what he had lost to end up alone in a place like this. When her lips moved again, the words barely formed. Why did you stop? He didn't look at her right away. Seemed wrong to keep riding when someone was still breathing out there. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped free, though she wasn't sure if it came from pain or the strange mercy in his tone. Outside, the coyotes began their low chorus. Their cries rose and fell, haunting yet distant. Once, those sounds had meant death closing in. Tonight, they sounded almost like witnesses to something beginning. He tossed another log on the fire. Sparks leapt upward, brief and bright before vanishing into smoke. "You can rest here," he said quietly. "Ain't nobody coming for you tonight." Her gaze met his again, sharp now, searching for cruelty, for trickery, for anything familiar from the world she'd just escaped. But there was none. Only weariness, and a kind of strength that didn't demand anything in return. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought she heard him whisper, not to her, but to the fire itself, "You'll be safe. I'll see to that." Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere in the darkness, the beasts gave up their chase and turned away. By the time dawn began to edge the sky, she was breathing easy, her face turned toward the faint warmth of the flames. He sat nearby, watching her like a man guarding something precious he hadn't meant to find. The coyotes fell silent. The desert held its breath. And somewhere deep inside that fragile quiet, she dreamed of footsteps returning, but this time, no one was leaving. The gunshot cracked the morning open like thunder. Birds scattered from the mesquite trees, and silence followed hard behind. He was already at the door before the echo faded, rifle in hand, boots grinding against the porch. She stood behind him, one hand pressed to her chest, eyes wide. Another shot rang out, closer this time, and a voice carried on the wind. Mocking, familiar. They'd come. The men who left her for dead had found her scent again. He didn't speak, only checked the chamber of his gun. His movements were calm, practiced, almost sorrowful. She wanted to run, to vanish into the dunes, but her body wouldn't obey. He turned to her, eyes steady. "Stay inside." The command was soft, but it held something absolute, an unspoken promise that he would not let them take her again. Through the crack in the cabin wall, she saw them approach. 3 riders, their laughter sharp, cruel. Dust rose behind their horses like a pale storm. They called her name, the one that used to mean belonging but now sounded like a curse. The leader raised his hat in mock salute, calling out that the desert hadn't finished what it started. He stepped off the porch, rifle low but ready. "Ain't looking for trouble," he said, though his voice carried enough steel to cut the air. The men laughed louder. The leader smirked, pointing toward the cabin. "She's ours, Cowboy. Don't make yourself another corpse for her sake." She pressed her palm against the window frame, trembling. The words dug into her chest. Ours, as if she were a thing to be claimed, passed from hand to hand. Something in her rose then, rage, memory, a pulse of defiance she thought the desert had buried. She reached for the small knife he'd left near the table, the one used for cutting meat, her hand shaking but certain. Outside, the standoff stretched thin as wire. He held the men's gaze, saying nothing. He'd seen this before, men puffed up with cruelty, mistaking fear for power. The wind shifted, and the smell of rain came rolling in from the south, heavy and electric. The first rider spat into the dust. "Ain't your fight, Cowboy. Step aside." He didn't. Instead, he lowered his rifle, eyes narrowing, voice quieter now. "You already left her for the beasts. Maybe let the earth decide if she's still yours." The leader scowled, drawing his gun. The movement was quick, but his shot came slower, hesitation or pride, he'd never know. The cowboy fired first. The sound split the storm's edge. The man's hat flew off as he reeled backward, blood blooming dark on his shoulder. The other 2 cursed and turned their horses, vanishing into the gathering rain. When it was over, he stood still, chest rising with controlled breaths. The wounded man crawled toward his horse, snarling promises through gritted teeth. The cowboy watched him go, then dropped his rifle into the mud. She stepped outside, barefoot, the knife still clutched tight. The rain began to fall, thick drops that hissed against the firewood and soaked the dust into clay. She looked at him, at the quiet strength that didn't boast, at the storm gathered in his eyes. "You could have let them take me," she said, voice low. He shook his head once. "Wouldn't be right." Something inside her cracked then, not from fear but from the unbearable weight of being seen. She had lived her whole life being measured by what she owed or what she'd lost. Now, for the first time, she stood in the rain, unowned, unafraid, her heart beating against the silence like a drum. They went back inside when the storm turned heavy. The fire had burned low, leaving only embers. She sat near it, fingers tracing the rim of a tin cup, while he cleaned his rifle in the corner, hands steady despite the tremor running through the house. "Why help me?" she asked again, softer this time. He looked up, eyes shadowed by the flame. "Because someone should've." The words landed like a prayer, simple, final, true. She nodded, blinking against the sting in her eyes. Outside, the rain eased, leaving the scent of wet sage and smoke. He moved to the doorway, leaning on the frame, watching the horizon fade back into calm. She joined him there, her shoulder brushing his arm, and for a moment neither spoke. The world felt balanced on a single breath. "You'll leave when it's safe?" he asked quietly. She looked out into the endless stretch of land, then back at him. "Maybe. But not tonight." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from deep loneliness meeting something warm. As the last light faded, the coyotes called again, closer this time, but their cries no longer sounded like hunger. They sounded like blessing. She turned toward him, rain still glistening in her hair. "I thought no one would come," she whispered. His hand brushed hers, rough and hesitant. "I ain't leaving you," he said. The fire sighed, the wind hushed, and for the first time since the scream that split the world open, she believed him. The desert, vast and cruel, felt suddenly small enough to hold them both.